Jack had just finished his shift at the colony's security station. The stars twinkled brightly above the small, quiet settlement, and the night air was crisp. Most of the workers had gone home, and the only sounds were the distant hum of machinery and the rustling of leaves. Jack had become used to the stillness of the night. But something felt different tonight. He walked down a narrow alley near the residential sector, heading back to his small apartment. It wasn't the safest place to be at this time of night, but Jack was used to the silence and the occasional strange sight. The colony was far from busy. Not many people traveled this deep into the settlement. But tonight, something caught his eye. At the edge of the alley, behind an old cargo crate, he noticed a strange movement. At first he thought it was a wild animal, maybe a rodent or something smaller. But as he took a few steps closer, he froze. There, lying on the ground, was an alien. She was small, fragile-looking, with skin that shimmered like a soft shade of blue. Her eyes were wide open, glowing faintly in the dark. Her wings, delicate and transparent, were folded against her back. She didn't seem to be moving, and Jack's first instinct was to call for help. But as he looked around, he realized there was no one nearby. Jack had seen plenty of aliens during his time at the colony. He had interacted with traders from different species, but none had looked like this. Crouched down cautiously beside her, unsure of what to do. Her breathing was slow but steady. "Hey, are you okay?" Jack whispered, even though he wasn't sure if she could understand him. He gently touched her arm, trying to check if she was injured. There was no immediate sign of a wound, but she appeared weak. The tiny alien stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes locked with his, and in that moment, Jack felt a strange connection. Without thinking, he picked her up carefully in his arms, cradling her gently. She didn't protest, as if she trusted him without question. Jack didn't know why, but he couldn't bring himself to leave her in the alley. "I'll take you somewhere safe," he muttered to himself. He walked quickly back to his apartment, making sure to keep a steady pace. He didn't want to attract attention, but at the same time, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. This alien was in his care now, and he had to make sure she was safe. When Jack finally reached his apartment, he set her down gently on his couch. She didn't resist as he moved her, simply curling up on the cushions. Jack grabbed a blanket from the closet and draped it over her fragile body. He couldn't help but notice how small she was, probably no taller than a child. Her wings were delicate, barely visible in the dim light of the room. For a moment, Jack just stood there, watching her. He didn't know what to do next. He had no experience with alien species like this. He had helped in small ways before delivering supplies, assisting with repairs, but this was different. This was an unknown creature, and there was no telling who might come looking for her. As he sat down at the kitchen table, Jack tried to think. Should he call the colony authorities? Should he report her to someone? He could imagine the questions they would ask, the suspicion in their eyes. The alien species was still unknown to many, and the last thing Jack wanted was to bring trouble to the colony. Jack rubbed his face with his hands. He could tell the alien needed medical attention, but he wasn't sure if she was even capable of communication. She hadn't spoken since he found her, only watching him quietly with those bright eyes. He glanced back at her on the couch. Her chest rose and fell gently with each breath. Despite her frail appearance, there was something about her that made Jack feel like he couldn't leave her alone. He felt a strange bond, like an invisible thread connecting them. "It looks like you're stuck with me for now," Jack said softly. Trying to break the silence, the alien blinked slowly, and Jack smiled weakly. He didn't expect an answer, but he still hoped for some sign that she understood. Suddenly, there was a soft movement. The alien shifted on the couch, pulling the blanket tightly around her shoulders. Jack didn't want to invade her space, but he couldn't help but watch her closely. She seemed to be gathering her strength, her tiny form trembling slightly as if she was trying to fight off exhaustion. Minutes passed. Now Jack began to feel a growing sense of unease. What was he supposed to do now? Should he let her sleep it off, or should he try to get help? His mind raced with questions, but the one thing he was sure of was that he couldn't just leave her there alone. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out into the night sky. The stars looked peaceful, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Something big was happening. He didn't know if it was because of the alien or if the universe had just decided to throw a curveball at him. Either way, his life was about to become a lot more complicated. With a sigh, Jack turned back to the couch. The tiny alien was still resting, her eyes closed, her breathing deepening as she drifted into sleep. Jack had a feeling that this was only the beginning. The quiet night outside seemed to hold its breath, and Jack couldn't help but wonder what would happen when morning came. Jack woke up to the soft hum of the colony's power systems outside his window. The first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, casting a pale glow across the room. He stretched, feeling the weight of last night's events settle in his mind. The tiny alien, still sleeping on his couch, was the first thing on his mind. He looked over at her, his heart pounding in his chest. She hadn't moved much through the night. Her wings were tucked in close to her body, and her blue skin shimmered faintly in the dim light. Jack couldn't stop staring at her. There was something about her, something he couldn't explain, that made him feel protective. He had offered her shelter, a safe place, but now that morning had arrived. He didn't know what to do. What did she want from him? Why had she appeared out of nowhere, and what had happened to her? Jack had never seen an alien like her before, and he had no idea if there were any other species out there who looked anything like her. He rubbed his eyes and sighed, standing up from the bed. Jack had been planning to leave for his shift, but now he felt torn. His responsibility toward her seemed more important than anything else. He walked over to the small kitchen and started making coffee, trying to gather his thoughts. As the aroma of the brewing coffee filled the room, Jack's mind raced. He wasn't a scientist, nor did he have any experience with extraterrestrial beings. He had always been just another worker on the colony, doing his job and staying out of trouble. But now, with this alien in his apartment, troubles seemed inevitable. After a few minutes, Jack couldn't wait any longer. He needed to check on her. He returned to the couch and gently nudged her awake. "Hey," Jack whispered softly, "are you okay?" The alien stirred but didn't open her eyes. Jack hesitated, unsure if she even understood him. She had only stared at him with those glowing eyes last night. But now, as the light hit her face, Jack noticed something new, a strange, quiet sense of recognition in her expression. It was almost as if she understood his words. After a few seconds, the alien slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze met his, and for a moment they just stared at each other in silence. Jack couldn't tell what she was thinking, but the moment felt intimate in a way he hadn't expected. Her eyes were full of unspoken questions and emotions that Jack couldn't quite understand. She shifted slightly on the couch. Sitting up slowly, Jack backed away, giving her space. It was clear that she wasn't fully recovered yet. She looked fragile, vulnerable. Jack could see that she was still in pain, and he felt a pang of guilt for not knowing how to help her more. "I'm Jack," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "You're safe here. I won't hurt you." The alien tilted, her head slightly, studying him. She seemed to understand the tone of his voice, even if the words didn't make much sense to her. Jack took a deep breath and tried again. "I can help you," he continued, speaking slowly. "If you need anything, just let me know." To his surprise, the alien reached out a small hand toward him, almost as if she was trying to communicate. Jack hesitated for a moment before gently taking her hand. Her skin felt cool to the touch, and the softness of her fingers sent a strange shiver down his spine. She looked at him with a silent intensity that made Jack feel uncomfortable. He didn't know what to say, but he couldn't deny the connection that was growing between them. The alien seemed to be trying to convey something, but Jack couldn't understand. Without warning, she pulled him closer, her eyes locking onto his. Jack froze, unsure of what was happening. Was this some sort of alien gesture? He had no idea, but it was clear that she was desperate for something. A sudden noise from the outside world broke the tension. Jack pulled back quickly, looking toward the window. He could hear the faint hum of a vehicle passing by, but it wasn't enough to distract him from the situation unfolding before him. The alien seemed to calm down when he pulled back. but there was a noticeable sadness in her eyes. Jack didn't understand what it was, but he knew that something was troubling her. The connection between them felt stronger now, more undeniable. "I don't know what's going on with you," Jack admitted softly, "but I can't leave you. Like this, you're not alone anymore." The alien seemed to react to his words, though she didn't speak. She looked at him with an intensity that made Jack feel a strange sense of responsibility. After a few moments of silence, Jack tried again. "Can you tell me what happened to you? How did you end up here?" The alien didn't respond right away, but her eyes darted toward the small window. Jack followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing. It was clear she didn't want to talk about it. She looked frightened, and Jack could feel her unease. "I'm not going to force you to talk," Jack said gently, "but I want to help you. I can't let you go without knowing that you're safe." The alien looked back at him and nodded slowly. She seemed to appreciate his words, even if she didn't fully understand them. It was clear that she wasn't entirely trusting yet, but Jack could see that she was beginning to rely on him. Jack stood up and moved to the kitchen, grabbing 2 cups of coffee. He wasn't sure if she could drink it, but he thought it might help. When he returned, he held out one of the cups toward her. "Here, you can drink this. It might help." The alien studied the cup for a moment before reaching out and taking it from him. She carefully brought it to her lips, sipping cautiously. Jack watched, fascinated by how delicate and graceful she was, even in her current state, as she drank. Jack sat down beside her, trying to think of a plan. He didn't have many options, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't just send her away. The bond between them was too strong. He felt responsible for her safety now. The morning light grew brighter as they sat in silence. Jack knew that there were many questions left unanswered, but he was determined to help her, no matter what. The sun had fully risen by the time Jack finished his coffee. He sat across from the tiny alien who was quietly sipping from her cup. She had barely said a word since she had woken up, and Jack was beginning to feel a little uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to tell him something important, but he wasn't sure what it was. After a few minutes, the silence between them felt too heavy to bear. Jack shifted in his seat, his mind racing with questions. What did she want from him? Why had she appeared here, of all places? And why did he feel like he couldn't walk away from this situation? The alien's blue eyes met his, and Jack was surprised to see a flicker of emotion. There's something beyond fear, something deeper. It was as if she had finally made up her mind about something. She set the cup down on the table and shifted closer to Jack, her small wings fluttering gently as she moved. "I don't understand you," Jack said quietly, "but I'm trying." The alien tilted her head slightly as if considering his words. Then, with a soft whimper, she reached out toward him, her small hand brushing against his arm. Jack froze. He wasn't sure what she wanted, but the gesture felt different from anything he had experienced before. It wasn't fear or distress this time. It was something else, a kind of silent plea, a request without words. Jack swallowed hard. He could feel the connection between them growing stronger with each passing moment. There was a part of him that wanted to pull away, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The alien needed him, and for some strange reason, he needed her, too. "What is it?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien's gaze softened, and she began to make a soft humming sound, almost like a song. Jack couldn't understand the words, but the tone was gentle and calming. It was as if she was trying to communicate with him in her own way. She repeated the sound again, and Jack realized it wasn't a random noise. It had a rhythm, a melody. To it, it was familiar, almost comforting. He wasn't sure if she was trying to soothe him or if she was asking for something. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, trying to clear his head. He had to understand what she needed. He didn't know how, but he couldn't ignore her any longer. "Do you need help?" Jack asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "Is there something I can do for you?" The alien's eyes brightened, and she nodded slowly. She reached out once again, this time touching Jack's hand. Her touch was light but firm, as if she was trying to convey something important. Then, to Jack's surprise, she placed her other hand over her chest, tapping it lightly. Jack frowned. What did she mean? It was as if she was trying to say that whatever she needed was inside or something that he could help with. She was showing him that she needed more than just shelter. She needed something else, something deeper. Okay, Jack said, his voice full of hesitation. I'll try to help, but you have to tell me what's going on. The alien stared at him with those glowing blue eyes. Jack could see the fear in her expression, but it was mixed with something else, something like hope. She wanted him to understand, but she didn't have the words to explain it. Jack's heart went out to her, and he knew he had to figure out a way to communicate with her, to make her feel safe. He stood up, walking over to the small desk in his apartment. He had a few old communication devices from his previous work, but none of them were built for alien species. He scanned through his tools, trying to find something that might help. But nothing seemed right. Jack turned back to the alien, frustration building inside him. I can't help you if I don't know what you need. Please, just tell me what's wrong. The alien didn't respond immediately, but her eyes never left his. She took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling with the effort. Slowly she pointed to the door. Jack's eyes widened in surprise. She wanted to leave, but where could she possibly go? The colony was too dangerous for her to venture out alone, especially if she was still injured. And yet, something in the alien's gaze told Jack that she wasn't asking to leave it, was more like she was pointing at something else. Realization hit Jack like a wave. The alien was asking him to help her with something outside. Something important? Her ship, maybe? He had seen the damage on her body the night before, but he hadn't thought to ask about her ship. It never crossed his mind that she might need to get back to it. Jack rushed to the door, opening it and stepping outside. He looked around, half expecting to see something out of place, but everything seemed quiet. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the hum of distant machinery. Do you want to show me where your ship is? Jack asked, looking back at the alien. If that's what you need, we can figure it out together. The alien nodded again, her wings fluttering. Slightly. She seemed to be more at ease now, as if Jack's willingness to help her had given her a sense of security. She stepped carefully toward him, her small frame moving with a quiet grace. Jack felt a strange pull to her, and without thinking, he stepped forward and offered his hand. The alien hesitated for just a moment before she placed her hand in his. It was warm, even though her skin was cool to the touch. Together, they walked out of the apartment, the unknown stretching before them. Jack wasn't sure what awaited them, but one thing was clear: this alien, this mysterious being who had appeared in his life, was not just a chance encounter. She had come to him for a reason, and Jack was determined to find out what it was. Jack and the alien, whom he now called Lyra, walked together through the quiet streets of the colony. The air was cooler now, and the silence around them felt heavier than it had earlier. Jack tried to focus on the path ahead, but his mind kept drifting back to Lyra. She had been silent for most of the walk, her small hand still in his, but he could feel the quiet energy between them growing stronger. They reached the edge of the residential sector, and Jack could see the beginning of the industrial zone in the distance. It wasn't a place many people ventured, especially at night. The zone was full of old machinery and abandoned buildings, places where danger often lurked. Jack had never gone this far before, but it seemed clear to him that Lyra wanted to go somewhere in that direction. Is this where you're trying to go? Jack asked quietly, glancing down at her. Are you sure it's safe? Lyra didn't answer with words. Instead, she pointed ahead, toward the darkened buildings in the distance. Jack could see the faint outlines of what looked like a damaged ship far off in the shadows. It was partially hidden behind some rusted structures, just barely visible. In the low light, Jack's heart skipped a beat as he realized that this was her ship, the one she had been trying to repair. We're almost there, Jack said softly, but there was something in his voice that made him uneasy. The closer they got to the wreckage, the more Jack's instincts told him that something wasn't right. There was a sense of stillness in the air, as if the area was holding its breath. Lyra seemed to sense it too. She tightened her grip on Jack's hand, her wings fluttering slightly as if she were nervous. Jack looked around, scanning the dark corners of the industrial zone. Nothing seemed out of place. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When they reached the ship, Jack was able to see it clearly for the first time. It was small and sleek, its surface battered and scorched as if it had been through a battle. Parts of it were still smoking, and Jack could tell that it had been through a lot of damage. The sight of the ship made him feel a sense of dread, but he couldn't explain why. There was something about it that didn't feel right. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the ship. She seemed to be scanning it, as if looking for something specific. Jack hesitated, unsure if he should follow her or wait back. He decided to stay close, not wanting to leave her alone in this strange place. "What's wrong?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is this where you need help?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved toward the ship, her small body moving carefully around the wreckage. Jack followed her, staying just behind, his eyes constantly darting around. It wasn't until they reached the ship's entrance that Jack saw something that made his blood run cold. There, hidden behind a pile of twisted metal, was a set of footprints, large, heavy, and unmistakably alien. "Lyra." Jack started, his voice tight with fear. "We're not alone." Lyra stopped in her tracks. Her wings stiffened, and her body tensed. She turned to look at Jack, her eyes wide with fear. Jack could see the fear in her expression for the first time, and it sent a chill through him. Whatever was out there, it was hunting her, before Jack could say anything else. A loud noise echoed from behind the ship, a thud, followed by the sound of something scraping against metal. Jack's heart raced, and he instinctively reached for his communicator, but it wasn't working. The signal in this part of the colony was spotty at best. "Stay close to me," Jack whispered, pulling Lyra behind him. He could feel her trembling, her small body barely making a sound as she pressed against him. Another thud came, this time louder. Jack's instincts screamed at him to run, but he knew it would be too late. Whatever was out there was close. Had to act fast. "Lyra, can you fly?" Jack asked, his voice low but urgent. He needed a plan. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, she seemed to understand what he was asking. She nodded, but Jack saw the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't sure if she could make it. "Okay, listen to me," Jack said, trying to think of a way to keep them both safe. "I'm going to check around the back of the ship. Stay hidden. I'll make sure we're not followed." Lyra didn't argue. She nodded again, and Jack watched her carefully as she crouched down behind a pile of debris. Jack turned to face the ship's entrance, ready for whatever was coming their way. He moved quietly, his steps as silent as he could make them, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. Just as he reached the back of the ship, Jack heard a voice, a low, rumbling growl that sent a wave of panic through him. He turned quickly, his hand on the gun at his side, but the figure that stepped into view made his blood run cold. The alien was huge, at least 7 feet tall. Skin was a dark, mottled green, and it had several large, sharp claws that looked like they could tear through metal. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and it bared its teeth in a snarl as it slowly advanced. Jack's heart raced as he realized the creature was not here to talk. It was here to hunt. He had only moments to act. Jack stepped forward, trying to make himself as visible as possible, hoping that the alien would focus on him instead of Lyra. The creature's red eyes locked onto him, and it let out another terrifying growl. Jack drew his gun and aimed at the creature, his hand steady despite the fear racing through him. The alien lunged forward, faster than Jack had expected, but he was ready. He fired. The shot echoed in the air, and the creature shrieked in pain as it staggered back, but it didn't fall. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the alien prepared to charge again. "Lyra," Jack shouted, "we need to leave now." The creature roared, its massive body towering over Jack. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, and the fear in his chest tightened like a vice. His mind raced, trying to find a way out of the situation. The alien's eyes gleamed with malice, and its sharp claws glinted in the low light. Every instinct told Jack to run, but he knew that wasn't an option. Not with Lyra behind him, and the creature so close. "Stay down," Jack shouted, over his shoulder, though he wasn't sure if Lyra could even hear him. He was trying to buy her some time, But the situation was growing worse with every passing second. The alien lunged at Jack, and without thinking, he fired his gun again. The blast hit the creature in the shoulder, but it barely flinched. Jack's heart sank. The creature wasn't even slowed down, was stronger than anything he had ever encountered, and it seemed determined to rip him apart. "Lyra, run!" Jack shouted, his voice desperate. He had to give her a chance to escape. But just as he said those words, the ground beneath them suddenly shook with a deep, rumbling vibration. The sound of a powerful engine echoed through the industrial zone. And Jack's first thought was that reinforcements for the creature were on the way. He didn't have much time. Then, a massive warship appeared in the sky above them, its engines glowing with an eerie light. It was enormous, far larger than any ship Jack had seen before. The warship hovered in the air, casting a long shadow. Over the wrecked ship, the air was thick with tension as the warship's hull gleamed in the dim light. Jack's eyes widened in shock. It wasn't just any ship, it was a military vessel. The insignia on the side of the ship was unmistakable. The markings were from a galactic empire, one that was feared across the galaxy for its ruthless tactics and vast reach. The creature, which had been focused on Jack, stopped in its tracks as the warship lowered itself slowly toward the ground. Jack could see soldiers moving on the ship's deck, their figures silhouetted against the bright lights. The creature hesitated, looking up at the approaching warship with clear hesitation in its movements. Jack didn't wait to find out what would happen next. His heart was pounding in his chest as he grabbed Lyra by the arm and pulled her toward the wrecked ship. She was still frightened, her small hand trembling in his, but Jack could see that she understood. There was no time to explain. They needed to move fast. "Come on," Jack shouted, urging Lyra forward as the warship's engines roared even louder. The alien soldiers would be landing soon, and Jack couldn't let that happen. He had no idea what they wanted, but he knew it wouldn't be good for Lyra. Lyra stumbled slightly as they ran, but Jack kept a tight grip on her. He could feel the panic rising in his chest, but he couldn't show it. He had to stay calm for both of them. He led her toward the small entrance to the damaged ship, praying it would still function. Jack glanced over his shoulder, but the creature was no longer following them. It was standing still, watching the warship in awe or fear. Jack couldn't tell which. They reached the entrance, and Jack quickly began to try to open the hatch. His hands fumbled nervously with the controls, but the door remained stuck. Ow! Sound of the warship getting closer made his heart race even faster. "Please," Jack muttered under his breath. "Come on, open!" Lyra stepped up beside him, her small fingers reaching out to touch the panel. Her touch was light, but she seemed to know exactly where to place her hands. The door clicked and then slowly began to open, revealing the inside of the wrecked ship. "Thank you, Jack," said, relieved, but still on edge. He grabbed Lyra's hand again and pulled her inside just as the warship touched down a short distance away. Once inside the ship, Jack sealed the hatch behind them. They were safe for now, but Jack knew it wouldn't be long before the soldiers from the Galactic Empire found them. Couldn't just hide here forever. The inside of the ship was dim, the walls cracked and scarred from the damage it had taken. It was clear that Lyra's ship had been through a terrible battle, and there were still faint signs of smoke in the air. Jack looked around, his mind racing for ideas. There had to be a way to get the ship working again, or at least enough to get them out of here. He turned to Lyra, who was standing quietly, her eyes scanning the room. She seemed lost in thought for a moment. Then she walked toward a console on the far side of the room. Jack followed her, watching as she carefully examined the controls. He could see her wings fluttering with concentration as she worked. "Are you doing?" Jack asked, stepping closer. Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she began pressing buttons on the console with a precision that surprised Jack. It was as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Jack was amazed by how familiar she seemed with the ship's systems. It was clear that Lyra wasn't just some random alien. She was skilled and intelligent. After a few minutes, the console hummed to life. A flickering light illuminated the dim room, and Jack felt a small sense of hope. Is it working? Jack asked, his voice full of disbelief. Lyra nodded and smiled for the first time. The smile was brief, but it was enough to ease some of Jack's fears. He knew there was still a long way to go. But for now, this was a victory. But the sound of footsteps approaching outside reminded him that the warship would soon be searching for them. The soldiers were relentless, and Jack couldn't risk getting caught. He had to move fast, and he had to get Lyra off the ship before it was too late. He turned to her urgency in his voice. "We need to go now, Lyra. I can't stay here. We need to leave fast." Lyra looked at him with a steady gaze, her eyes full of determination. She understood. They both knew what was at stake. This was just the beginning, and there was no turning back. Jack didn't need to look outside the ship to know that time was running out. The sound of the warship's engines and the heavy footsteps of the soldiers echoed closer and closer. The unmistakable feeling of impending danger hanging in the air. Lyra's ship, though damaged, had come to life with her touch, but it still wasn't ready to fly. Every moment that passed brought them closer to being discovered. "We need to go, Lyra. We can't wait any longer," Jack said, his voice tight with urgency. He stood near the controls, watching as Lyra continued to work, her fingers moving swiftly over the broken console. Lyra looked up at him, her blue eyes focused and determined. She didn't seem as scared as she had earlier, but Jack could see the exhaustion in her small frame. She had been through so much already, he wasn't sure how much more she could handle. And yet, she was still pushing forward, unwilling to give up. "Can you get it working?" Jack asked, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Lyra nodded, her wings fluttering slightly as she concentrated on the ship's control panel. Jack had no idea what she was doing, but the calmness in her movements told him she knew exactly what needed to be done. Couldn't help but admire her for that. There was a quiet strength in her that he hadn't noticed before. "I trust you," Jack said quietly, his words heavy with the weight of his promise to her. He had never been in a situation like this before, and he had no idea how they were going to escape. But he knew that no matter what happened, he couldn't leave her behind. The sound of the soldiers getting closer grew louder. Jack's pulse quickened, and he took a few steps toward the window, trying to keep his cool. The last thing he wanted was to make a mistake that would get them both caught. "What do we do if they find us?" Jack asked, his voice tight with concern. Lyra didn't answer at first. She glanced over her shoulder at Jack, her face expressionless. But her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite understand. She looked back at the console, pressing a few more buttons. She was working quickly now, her movements almost frantic as the ship's systems came online. Jack's heart raced as the ship's engines hummed to life, though they sounded weak and strained. The warship outside was getting closer, and the soldiers' voices were now clearly audible through the walls of the ship. Jack's hand instinctively reached for the gun at his side, but he knew that a fight wasn't the answer. They had to escape. Lyra turned toward Jack, her eyes locking onto his. She stepped forward, her small form moving gracefully despite the chaos around them. "We have to move," now Lyra said in a soft voice, her words clear and firm despite the urgency of the situation. It was the first time she had spoken in words, and Jack felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. He could understand her now. She wasn't just some frightened alien. She was someone who had been through hell and back, and she wasn't going to give up. Jack could see that now. Jack nodded quickly. "I'll help you." Together, they moved to the back of the ship, where Lyra had indicated the escape hatch. Jack could hear the soldiers now, their footsteps echoing through the corridors outside. The pressure was mounting, and Jack knew that every second counted. Thalia had already shown him how capable she was, but Jack also realized that he needed to take action. They both did. The hatch opened with a hiss, revealing the dark, empty space outside. Jack hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with the weight of what was about to happen. This was it. There was no going back after this. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped outside first, her wings fluttering lightly behind her as she moved. Jack followed closely, staying close to her side. The air outside was thick with tension, and Jack could feel the cold sweat on his brow. But he didn't falter, not this time. They moved quickly, the distance between them and the warship narrowing. With every step, The ground beneath them was rocky and uneven, but Jack's focus was solely on Lyra. She led the way, her small figure weaving between debris and crumbled structures. Jack didn't dare look back, couldn't afford to. Just as they reached a narrow alley that led to a more open area, a loud voice rang out. There they are. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The soldiers had found them. The sound of heavy footsteps thundered behind them, and Jack's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her forward, his legs moving faster now. The warship loomed behind them, its engines worry as it prepared to take off. They ran for what felt like hours, though it was only a few minutes. Jack's breath was coming in ragged gasps, and his legs burned with exhaustion, but he didn't stop. Lyra was still beside him, her grip tight on his hand as she moved with surprising speed. Finally, they reached a small maintenance tunnel. Jack slid inside, first turning to help Lyra through. She followed quickly, but just as she stepped inside, a blast hit the ground near them, sending a shockwave through the air. Jack stumbled backward, his heart in his throat. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him forward as the blast rocked the tunnel. They both kept running, not daring to look back. The sound of the warship's engines grew louder as they neared the end of the tunnel. Jack could feel the heat of the blast from the explosion in his chest. They were so close now. The ship was waiting for them. "Lyra, get ready," Jack shouted, his voice hoarse from the running. Lyra nodded, wings flapping slightly as she reached the end of the tunnel. Jack's hand shot out, grabbing the control lever to open the hatch. The warship's fire hit just as the hatch opened, sending debris flying everywhere. Jack slammed the lever down and the hatch closed with a loud clang. They were safe for now. Lyra turned to Jack, her face pale but determined. "We've made it," she whispered. Jack took a deep breath, looking at her with a mix of relief and awe. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, but there was a sense of calm in his voice now. He knew they could do it. Together, they could make it. The ship's engines roared to life as Lyra started the controls. Jack watched the stars outside the viewport, his mind racing with everything that had happened. The galaxy was vast and full of unknown dangers, but for the first time, Jack felt like he had a purpose in it. He wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Lyra.